Have you felt it? That shift in how we talk about borders, about who gets to call a country home? Well, it's not just you. We're living through what's being called the Great Contraction of immigration. And in this explainer, we're going to break down exactly why that welcome mat is being pulled back all over the globe and what it really means for everyone. For most of our lifetimes, the story has been all about connection, right? More travel, more trade, more people moving freely. It felt inevitable. But what if that whole era is winding down? That's the big question keeping policymakers awake at night, from DC to Berlin. And it's a question that's going to affect everything, from our economies to the very fabric of our cities. Think of the last few years like a movie. The first act, a huge post-pandemic boom. Countries were desperate for workers to kickstart their economies, and they basically threw the doors open. We're now in the sequel, and let me tell you, the tone has changed. It's a story of tightening rules, anxious populations, and really, really tough decisions. So we're going to explore the three big reasons we got here: a new kind of economic math, the hidden cost of growth, and a surprising truth about public safety. Okay, first up, it all starts with the money. For decades, the logic was super simple. More people means more workers, which means a bigger economy. Easy. But now, governments are looking at the price tag with a magnifying glass. They're not just asking, can you do a job? They're asking, over your lifetime, will you be a net gain for the public purse? It's a whole new ballgame. And this is where it gets really fascinating. It's like every country is playing a different game of high-stakes chess. You've got the US making this incredibly bold, some might say risky move, that could seriously hurt its economy. Then you have the UK and Australia playing it much more cautiously, trying to handpick only the most economically beneficial players. And Germany, they're in a race against the clock, trying to find just the right talent to fill critical gaps. So let's zoom in on the UK's new system, because it's a total rewrite of the rules. Think about it. Permanent residency used to be a path you followed. Now it's a privilege you have to earn. The finish line isn't fixed anymore. It's a moving target that's much, much harder to hit. This is way more than a policy tweak. It's a fundamental change in what it means to belong. And here you see the two philosophies side by side. On one hand, the US approach looks a bit like a wrecking ball, potentially knocking a huge $100 billion hole in consumer spending. On the other hand, the UK model is more like a surgeon's scalpel, trying to precisely extract maximum financial benefit. The big question, of course, is which of these strategies is actually sustainable in the long run. Okay, now let's talk about something else. Imagine your house is a country. A few guests? No problem. But what if the party gets so big that the lights start flickering and the plumbing gives out? That's kind of what's happening in our biggest cities. We're hitting a physical limit. And for a lot of people, the party is over. Canada has become the poster child for this. If you've tried to find an affordable place to live in any major city lately, you get it. Now multiply that struggle across an entire nation. That's Canada. A historic influx of new people ran headfirst into a housing market that was already stretched to its limit. The result? A full-blown national crisis. This chart tells the whole story, really. The first bar, that's population growth. And as you can see, it's shooting through the roof. The second bar? That's new homes being built. It's basically flat. And that huge gaping chasm between the two, that's where the crisis lives. Too many people, not enough homes. And the public noticed. A massive 58% of Canadians, a record high, said this is too much, too fast. The pressure was so intense, the government had no choice but to hit the brakes. For the first time, Canada is explicitly linking immigration levels to infrastructure. They're saying we can't accept more people until we have the homes and services to support them. That's a huge shift. But here's a little twist for you. In the UK, a common complaint is that immigrants are clogging up the roads. The data, though, tells a completely different story. It turns out immigrants are more than twice as likely to use public transit, walk, or bike. So if you're stuck in traffic, chances are it's not them adding another car to the mess. All right, let's get into the most sensitive part of this whole debate: crime. It's the one issue that just sends emotions flying. But what if the story we're often told isn't the real story? What if the actual data paints a picture that's, completely the opposite of what you'd expect? Let's take a look. We've all seen the headlines, we've all heard the speeches that can paint a pretty scary picture. But here's the thing about data. It doesn't have an agenda. And when you look at decades of research, the story that emerges is not about rising crime. It's about something else entirely. So here it is, the big one. A massive study looking at 55 different countries found that as immigrant populations grew substantially, the global homicide rate actually went down. Let me say that again. More immigration on a global scale correlated with less violent crime. It's a finding that completely turns one of the most common arguments on its head. And if you look at the group that is so often at the center of this debate, undocumented immigrants, the data is even more surprising. A landmark study in Texas found their felony arrest rate was nearly half that of native-born citizens, 46% lower. The reason? Researchers believe it's largely due to a constant, profound fear of deportation. They're trying to stay completely invisible. So we've covered the why, the economic pressures, the strained infrastructure, the gap between fear and fact. Now let's talk about the how. How are countries actually putting these new ideas into practice? This is the new playbook for immigration control. And believe me, it is a game changer. The UK's new system really lays it all out. You need a clean record, you need to prove your integration, and you need to meet a salary threshold. But the biggest change? The waiting period for settlement has been doubled or even tripled. It effectively risks creating a permanent underclass of long-term residents who contribute for decades but may never get the full rights of citizenship. And forget about walls made of bricks and steel. The new border wall is digital. It's being built with artificial intelligence and algorithms that are becoming the new border guards. We're talking about the most sophisticated and, frankly, the most opaque screening system humanity has ever created. Your entire future can be decided by a black box with no human to appeal to. The US is going all in on this. We're talking about AI systems that automatically risk score you before you even apply, AI platforms that plan arrests, machine learning that scans for contraband, and facial recognition apps that verify your identity without anyone ever talking to you. It's less land of the free and more Minority Report. And we need to grapple with what that really means. So, where does this all lead? What does the future look like? We are clearly standing at a major crossroads. For decades, the world was moving in one direction, towards more openness. Now, that's no longer a given. The choices being made right now will define global migration for generations to come. So, if we boil it all down, here are the three big takeaways. First, immigration is now being judged through a lens of extreme economic pragmatism. Second, the hard limit on how many people a country takes in is no longer about jobs. It's about housing and infrastructure. And third, technology, especially AI, is creating digital fortresses that are tougher to get through than any physical wall. And that leaves us with this final massive question. In a world where climate change will displace millions and where economic needs are constantly shifting, how do we find the right balance? How do we protect our own national resilience while also living up to our shared human responsibility? There are no easy answers, but finding a way to be both smart and compassionate might be the single biggest challenge of our time.